Harry Hofer, welcome back to What's Possible in the Moment.
It is great to be here, Eileen. Ready for another nudge in our series of nudges. It's great to talk to you.
I cannot wait to hear what our next nudge is. For our listeners who have been following Harry, we are on about nudge 1 million. No, actually, we are not, but it seems like we've done quite a few. So you have probably listened to at least 5 to 8 nudges at this point. And I am having so much fun with my dear friend Harry. Harry and I, for those who have not been on some of these, we went to graduate school together in the science of well-being. Harry also works for a very large organization as an internal coach, working with the most senior leadership. One thing I want to make sure that I point out, though, at this moment is everything that Harry shares are all Harry's thoughts and Harry's alone. He is not here to represent his organization. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Harry. But before I do, if you're on and you're thinking, oh no, I haven't listened to any nudges with Harry, am I going to be lost? No, you won't be lost. Each of these nudges are contained. You're going to get a grab and go something that you can immediately put into play in your organization. And at the same time, I'm thinking you'll probably want to go back and just search up all the other nudges because Harry is on fire with these nudges. So, Harry, take it away.
I am burning to tell you this next nudge, Eileen. Actually, there is a four-alarm fire blazing because as I thought of what we could talk about today, I came up with a number of choices that I couldn't necessarily find a theme to stick them all together. So I thought I would give that choice to you. So I have 6 mini nudges ready, Eileen, and then for as much time as we have, we'll just cover what we have time for. So that means that you get to pick a number between 1 through 6 to get us started, and that will lead us to our first nudge. So what
Okay.
number would you pick, 1 through 6?
It has to be 2, which is my favorite number because my birthday is February 2nd, 2 2. So let's take it away with 2.
I love it because that is my favorite number as well. That was the number I wore in football. I want to be
Ah,
clear that I wore it while sitting on the bench, but it still was my number and became my favorite because I was just happy to be on the team. All right. Number 2 is a question. And I would say throughout all my career as a leader and a coach, one of the things that I would I would say I've done a good job of is create an environment where people can be vulnerable.
mhm.
And so they will then come to me with the need to vent or just to share a concern or a problem because they're not sure where to go other than their own head. And as we probably all could agree, that's sometimes not the best place to keep a problem.
True.
Even coaches would say they're not the best at coaching themselves sometimes. So I encountered amongst many coaches and mentors and thought leaders a coach named Jerry Colonna, who's got a wide background, and you can search with him. But a question in an interview I listened to with him really stuck with me, and I've used it a number of times in these situations where someone is venting out a problem and not sure what to do about it. I think we all intuitively know that when you get to that place, the first place you should go is to say, well, what is controllable by me?
Mhm.
And yet that's hard to say it in that way. And so I'm always looking for nudges or questions that might allow your brain to tackle it a little bit different. And here's the question that I heard in this interview with Jerry that then I've used many times. And the question goes like this: how are you complicit in creating the conditions you say you want to change?
Mm.
And this is a great question to just put the mirror up in front of the other person. And by the
Mhm.
way, if you're asking this question, you're going to mirror yourself too. So be ready for what it might, kind of dig up for yourself. But how are you complicit in creating the conditions you say you want to change? And I'll just get your reaction, Eileen, to that. I imagine you've asked questions along a similar line, but how do you react to this one?
Yeah. No, I have, and I'm thinking of a one client in particular who I just met with recently who, kind of asking some similar questions. I like this. I think where I'm feeling a little bit feeling some pause is I love it because it's direct and it pushes somebody to think about how am I creating my circumstances, right?
It's a challenging question,
It
Eileen,
is a
for sure.
challenging question. And so I think, I'm thinking about some of our leaders, and if they're also trying to build rapport at the same time, it
Mhm.
could feel like it might shut a door. I think there needs to be a high level of trust. So for you, you create a space, a safe space that's confidential where people really can be vulnerable. So now I'm thinking about a leader who somebody might not feel as safe with yet. And then if the leader were to ask that, it could it might close down the person, but it's such a powerful question. So I'm thinking, how can you ask a similar question, but that doesn't cause someone to possibly shut down?
I don't want to say this is happening just as we rehearsed it, Eileen, because we don't rehearse these, but
No, we
it
don't.
is, you're following up with a perfect caveat to that question that I've adapted for that reason. And I think it's a great point that you bring up. Like, we are assuming that that safe space has been created so that
Yes.
you have the ability to challenge without impacting the nature of the relationship and what you've built at that point. So the revision or the edit that maybe is a little less challenging but keeps to the spirit of it is something like, let me take you to an example. I know that we've been talking about how I tend to avoid taking the mic or the stage, even though as an executive, I should be doing that more. But I really think that Billy deserves an opportunity. This will be good development for them if they do the speaking part instead of me this time. And so, a kind of spin off of the complicit question is I might ask, appreciate you sharing that, but I want to ask a question. Is what you said about Billy, is that an explanation of the decision that you made, or is it an excuse because you don't want to get up in front and grab the mic? And so, an explanation or an excuse, I think, is kind of in the spirit of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yet is still that challenging question that you're trying to nudge someone to maybe face
Yeah.
a truth that they can control, but are having a hard time controlling it.
Yeah, because it's so funny, we have that old saying that we grew up with, sticks and stones may break my bones, words will never hurt. And the reality is words are really powerful. And
Yeah.
so how we say something can allow someone to hear it and adjust accordingly, or it can shut them down. And so I like that. And again, it does require that relationship. So you want to have that relationship. And so now I'm thinking, okay, well, what if you don't? What if it's somebody new who you're starting to see some behaviors that are limiting, that they might be, limiting mindset or self sabotaging behaviors, and it's a newer person, and you're feeling like, oh gosh, I want them to unleash this in them. And so as I'm saying this, I'm starting to think of, okay, how would I help coach that person? I'm curious for you. I'm going to turn this question back on you. It's a new leader who you're watching the mindset get in the way. How might you handle that?
I like, you've taken us down, I think, in past nudges, a route of like whatever they are sharing with you, this question of, well, or this thought of, well, that's one way to look at it. But part of why we're together is to look at lots of different ways to look at
Mm,
this
yeah.
situation. So I think you have in the past said, what else could be true, or a
Yeah,
version of
exactly.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
right? So, what are some other ways to look at it? By the way, that's my tell. If you know that I'm in coach mode with you, if I say, well, that's one way to look at it, but what's another way? Then I am definitely coaching you.
Note to self.
note to self to know that. So I think I might start there. What are, if we were looking at lots of different options for this situation that you're sharing with me, like what are some other options that you could take? And then I think
Mm.
I'd start that way and then get a feel for how that person reacts to that.
I love that. Yeah, love. And along those lines, what I was kind of starting to think in my mind that is very closely aligned is I notice that it's feeling like a dead end, or I notice, and reflect back where you think they are. And I'm so curious, where in this situation do you have choice? And let's start playing with where the choice might lie. Because for some people, that control issue, like you said at the beginning, this whole question is a spinoff of where do you have control? Where don't you have control? Of course, we want to play in the zone where we have control.
Yeah.
Choice switches it ever so slightly because oftentimes we don't think we really have choice. And when we step back, and it's not really a threatening question, it's like there's a lot of space we don't have choice in. But where is there a window that you might have a little bit of choice? And now, what do you want to do with that choice? Is
Oh,
something I
great.
was
I,
thinking.
I mean, how great, Eileen. And then if we build on that too, once you've explored those choices, my guess or my intuition would say, or my experience would say, that that person is in a place where you could come back and challenge a little bit. All right, we've talked
Yeah.
about all these choices, but you know what? I wonder, like, what if you had to do, like, what if you had to take the mic? What
Yeah.
would that look like? How would you
Love.
prepare?
Yep.
Right. And then my guess is that they go there in a whole different way, and it can get to elements of, what's the worst thing that could happen. You could bring in some safety net coaching and then talk through that. I imagine, in fact, experience probably for both of us would say that if you explore all those routes, when you get back to it, they probably can find their way to what maybe they were hesitant to be all
Yeah.
in on, and be much more in on it than before.
Yeah. Excellent. And the very last thing I'll throw in that's a great way I think to for a leader to handle it with either a new person on your team or someone who there's always kind of that gap of comfort level. So it's kind of a safe way. And I love that you gave kind of the more intimate comfort, high psychological safety and vulnerability path, and then the one that's not as someone might not feel as psychologically safe right out of the gate. So we kind of have given both those ranges. The one other thing I'll add into the mix, which we talk a lot about in the field of positive psychology when we are trying to help people get out of their own way in terms of mindset, is distancing ourselves. So, how might you advise a friend? If you were in, and you could, in this case, you could pick a colleague, hey, if Harry were coming to you talking about this, what might you say to Harry? And so you pick a peer that they're good friends with, maybe, and get them to see it out of their own situation, but what they might tell a peer, a good friend, and then they can see it differently. And then, interesting. For Harry, you'd say, yeah, you should go do that talk. I'm curious now. Does that shift anything in you?
It does. In fact, I am going to add to that too. And well, one, I'm realizing we're just going to get to one of our nudges
Yes.
today. So we've got more that the listeners will wonder. Well, wait, what were the other numbers? So we'll talk about that. I would say I'll even build on Ethan Cross as a professor
Mhm.
at Penn, where we've been in. His book Chatter is one that talks about another similar tool, Eileen, to saying, if you were coaching a friend or if a friend was coaching you, is that you can, I've had a few people do this and it feels a little weird, but it works every time, is that if you tell me your situation with you in the third person,
Yeah.
and by doing that, you are, the neuroscience would say, you're shutting down some of the emotional fight or flight mechanisms that occur, and that story, when you're talking about yourself in the third person, you allow yourself to become that detached observer, which would be a coaching term that we like to use, and can see it a little more objectively than maybe the subjective way that's creating the obstacles that you have before you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So I do a talk specifically on getting out of your own way and mindset. and I bring that one up, but when I bring it up, I say, "Bear with me, this one feels really weird to me."
It
However, for
does.
some
It's so
people,
weird.
it's so weird, and so I don't use it, and I don't make clients go through it. However, there's research behind it, and it really resonates for people, so thank you for bringing it up because different things work for different people, and so I'm glad you you brought up that one because it can be quite impactful. So
Harry was slightly nervous about coming on the podcast with Eileen today, but Harry took the time to sit quietly and get his thoughts organized before he started. Everything went well and they lived happily ever after the
and
end.
Eileen was very grateful that Harry joined us. All right, thank you all for joining. We will be back for the nudges that Harry did not get to. So that would be nudge 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we have 5 more nudges we know coming your way in the relatively near future. But fear not, if those are not out yet, you have plenty of nudges to go back to. So I invite you to look at some old nudges as well as some older podcasts. Harry, thank you again for joining me on What's Possible.
Eileen, thanks for being complicit and getting me on the podcast today.